Here's the big question. How do you create your most authentic, successful, and fulfilling life? The Fresh Blood podcast studies the stories of people over the age of 40 who are thriving in life, finding those core golden threads that connect the underlying successes, those universal truths. I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. Listen and learn from the stories of others to help you soar and live the life that you were meant to thrive in. Today, we are speaking with Christy Keating. Christy is no stranger to reinvention. After leaving a 20-year career as a prosecutor in the sexual crimes unit, Christy pivoted to a passion. Christy became a certified parent coach and helps prevent sexual abuse by training parents and others who work with kids to see the red flags. Christy is now the founder and CEO of the Heartful Parent Collective, and she loves helping parents find more love, joy, and connection in their families. She is a certified parent coach, a certified positive discipline instructor, a certified instructor with the Gottman Institute, as well as a longtime leader and speaker at the Program for Early Parent Support through the Heartful. Christy also offers child safety workshops, presentations, and consulting to both parents and professionals. I have to say, I'm really looking forward to learning more. Christy, thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please, could you tell us a little bit more about your story and getting to where you are today?
Yeah, well, first, let me just say thank you for having me. It's really lovely to be here and to share my journey with your listeners, which has been sort of a different one, I guess. When I was in college many years ago, flitted from one thing to the next in terms of deciding what I wanted to be. And then I had the opportunity to intern in a DA's office in the state that I was in college in, and met this woman who became a lifelong friend and mentor of mine. And she was working as a DA, and I thought, hey, this is pretty interesting and feels like she's doing good work in the world. She was a domestic violence prosecutor.
Interesting. And so you had no interest before this. This was just a happenstance for you.
This was a complete happenstance.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I had, I loved in high school watching, movies about the law, but it never really occurred to me as a career choice. And this was just through a series of really kind of random events. I ended up doing this internship and fell in love with the work. And so decided that I wanted to go to law school to be a prosecutor.
Yeah.
And that was really my singular focus for many years after that. So I got a job out of college doing some legal work so that I could get into law school. And all through law school, my goal was to become a prosecutor or a DA.
You knew.
Depending on where you live, it's called different things. I was recruited by some big law firms where, frankly, I could have made a lot more money. And I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And so I
in touch with that
law school
early on. I just have to say, I'm really impressed with being so in touch with like what you wanted to do so early on. Okay, go on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a really clear vision for me.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated from law school, I was hired by the prosecutor's office in Seattle, where I actually worked for them during law school as well. And I spent the next, 18 plus years prosecuting everything from petty theft and driving under the influence to first degree murder. And I kind of landed in the latter part of my career in a place where I was prosecuting sex offenders and sexually violent predators. And I loved the work. It was very all-consuming. It was my identity. It was a really, really significant part.
It's a big deal because what you're doing is a big deal. So it's hard to be like, it's just selling something or.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't a job that I did from 9 to 5. It was a job that, well, first of all, the hours were longer than that. And even when I wasn't at work, it very much consumed my, who I was and what I thought about and how I managed my stress. It filtered into everything.
How do you feel? How did it impact your life at that time, especially being a prosecutor and working in the court systems and seeing these types of things? How did that impact your life, do you feel?
Well, in a lot of different ways. So the first was just that my whole world kind of became this job. My friends were located in this job. So my social life grew out of it. Obviously, I was spending a lot of hours doing that, and it certainly impacted my view in many ways. The funny story is when I met my husband, we've been married for 15 years now. So I was actively doing this work at that time. And I was actually prosecuting domestic violence cases. And, I hadn't met anyone at work. I didn't really want to marry another lawyer. And I was kind of looking around me saying, well, my choices here are another lawyer or someone who's on the wrong side of the law. And so, that sort of drove me to expand where I was looking. So it impacted me in that way, of course. But I don't know that I felt the full impact of the work on an emotional level until I became a parent. And, when I was doing the work of prosecuting sexually violent predators and that work, I was speaking with them. I was, reading a lot about their histories. And it really did take a toll in terms of knowing that, my sweet children that were at home would have been the ideal victims for some of these individuals that I was interacting with at work. And so there was a definite emotional impact, and I had to learn how to compartmentalize in a way that I'd never had to do before. So, kind of leaving work at work, if you will. And I would use my commute as a way of really decompressing from my day. Some days I was more successful at that than others, but for the most part, I got pretty skilled at, I don't want to say detaching myself, because I was very, very connected and deeply passionate about the work, but I had to disconnect my emotions a bit, just for my own sanity.
Oh yeah, I completely, well, because you are being exposed and seeing the underbelly of life on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And that does have an impact. And like you said, I mean, especially when you become a parent. And I was curious because my mom actually worked in the criminal system as a court clerk. And, but she, every day would watch these trials and it definitely impacted her as a parent. I know I can say, I got lots of talks.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but it's you have to, you can't help it. And so, but you have to come up with ways to deal with it. And so I was curious, that was going to be my follow-up question is, how did you deal with it? Was there anything that helped you be able to move forward with your day-to-day life, the weekends and that kind of thing?
It's a great question. And I'll be really honest and say some days I did it in very healthy ways. And some days I came home and ate a tray of cupcakes. The things that were sort of long-term sustaining are the things that continue to be long-term sustaining for me now, which is movement and, healthy food and getting outside and reading books that had nothing to do with the law and watching shows that had nothing to do with the law. I know people in our culture are fascinated by this type of work. And so that's why shows like Law and Order and so popular. Bones and all the different shows that are out there about this are so fascinating to people. And I can't watch them. And I think I can't watch them for two reasons. One, I've lived that, and they get it all wrong.
Can't help but nitpicking, and so it's hard to enjoy.
I drove my husband crazy because I'd be like, objection, you can't do that.
That's so funny.
Yeah. But I definitely found that for me, watching and reading things that were completely distance from that world were also a really healthy, good, productive way for me to kind of give my brain a break, if you will.
Yeah. What was your personal choice? Did you like comedy or drama or what? Just curious.
Well, Downton Abbey was a big favorite.
Oh, loved. I just went to the castle, actually. It was really exciting.
Oh my gosh.
Castle.
That would be really fun.
Yeah.
Shows like that were, I mean, certainly there was drama in there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But it's,
the point of the show, but
it's different. It's
completely different. Yeah.
I get it. So tell me how did things change? Where did it come to head for you?
Yeah. So, my oldest kiddo, who will be 13 this year, going on sometimes 47, I think. When she was born, it really, really rocked my world in a way that I had not expected. I'm fairly type A. I'm, accustomed to being fairly high achieving. You give me a project, I figure it out. Mm-hmm. I can digest large amounts of information in a small amount of time, and I can run with it. And so I was used to functioning in this world of there's not a problem that I can't figure out, right? Mm-hmm. And then I had a baby. And for any of your listeners who are parents, babies are all sorts of problems that you can't figure out.
Changes everything.
And they continue to be that. And so I really describe that time in my life after she was born, like the rug was pulled out from underneath my feet. The lights were turned off and I was trying to navigate my way in the dark. My identity shifted, but I hadn't really figured out yet how it had shifted. My partnership with my husband struggled massively.
Mm-hmm. Huge change.
It was a huge change. It is for every family, right? My connection to my work shifted in a way that I had not anticipated. My connection to myself changed. And I had no idea yet who I was really as a parent. So I really felt like I had no footing, and I didn't know how to get my footing. And it was a really, really rough, I would say, year plus till I kind of started to come out of the fog of that and started to realize that, yes, I still deeply loved that work. And my interests were starting to shift.
Right.
And I was starting to find other things that were more, that were filling me up in a different way.
Interesting. Now, is that what helped you find your footing?
I started diving in to learning as much as I could about parenting and partnering while parenting and, trying to sort of figure out like, what happened? What just happened in my life? Right?
Well, exactly. You knew that you were struggling, and you went out to figure out why and what the tools were to help you, which I commend you with, because look, so many times in our life are we struggling, and we do not go look for the tools to help us figure it out. We just keep flailing until something, whatever. Yeah, I mean, really. So good job.
And we do, frankly, in the workforce as a whole, we do a pretty terrible job of supporting parents and helping them through this transition. And I was very much I don't like the word victim, but the victim of that, right? I was one of the many parents that was trying to figure out how in the world do I parent as if I don't have a job and do my professional life as if I'm not a parent. And there was no guidance provided for me on that. There was really no sympathy or empathy or, really offered in the legal field as a whole. It's not a system set up to support parents. It could be, but it's not.
Many other fields similar.
Yeah. I mean, and that's very true across the workforce. Yeah. Corporate America doesn't play well with parents.
No.
So I, as I started on this journey of kind of figuring out what kind of happened in my own life, my passion really started to shift, and I was finding myself really interested in theories around parenting and how do we support parents and how do we show up as the best parents that we can, and what are healthy ways to parent. I had wonderful parents, and like all of our parents, they made mistakes that I was hoping to not repeat. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, we're all making our own mistakes.
Our own mistakes, yes.
But I didn't want to repeat some of those mistakes. Yeah. And so I just got really deep into this. And in the process of that, I came across the coaching institute that I eventually attended that was talking about parent coaching as a career path. And I think I went back to that website probably a dozen times over the course of 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Because I had been so driven for so long to do this one job.
Yeah.
Like that had been my world. And so there was this thought in my head that was really, what right do I have to change at this point?
Every right. Sorry.
Right. Every right. I know that now. But it took me a while to get there.
Yeah, I know.
Because I didn't have anyone saying to me, hey, it's okay to shift, right?
Well, like you said, you work so hard to get there. And that's what so many of us do. We've spent so much time, so much effort getting to that point. There's this fear of like, well, what do I do if I step off now?
Yeah. Yep.
So it's a big deal.
And I was still paying my law school loans.
Right. Oh,
right?
Yeah.
How do I leave a career when I haven't even paid off the loans yet?
Yeah.
And it was such a piece of my identity. It was what people respected about me. I'm not going to lie. There's some ego wrapped up in that.
Oh yeah.
Right. And the idea of leaving that all behind to be what? To work with parents? And in fact, fast forward, when I did eventually leave, one of my long-term colleagues said, you can't leave. You're a lifer. Like you're doing, right? He was so taken aback by the idea that I might shift that because we'd worked together for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I checked this website again and again. Mm-hmm. I became increasingly frustrated simultaneous to that with some of the politics that were happening in my office. Again, as I said, the lack of support for women and parents, some of the attitudes in the legal field in general and in the criminal world specifically.
Yeah.
And I started to really more seriously consider, like, is this really where I want to be for the rest of my life? And, it was a gradual process, and then suddenly it wasn't. So one day I just knew I needed to change. Now, prior to that, while I was still working there, I had actually gone through the training, become a certified parent coach, but it was kind of just for fun.
Yeah, here's your passion.
I'm not really going to do anything.
You listened to yourself. You kept going to that website. Clearly, you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
You have to listen to yourself.
I did want to do it, and I wasn't doing a good job of listening to myself. I was talking myself out of it for a million different reasons.
Which we do.
And even when I finished the training, I thought, well, that was great. and I kind of did some coaching on the side, pro bono, not, with friends. And then I had this moment, and I was sitting in my office one day, and, there had just been a series of things going on in the office and in the justice system at that point. And I sat there at my desk and I typed out my resignation letter. And I called my husband and I said, honey, I'm going to quit. I just typed out the letter. Now, he and I had talked about this some, but he was like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's like, can we talk about this when you get home, please?
What'd you say?
And I think, he really had this big fear, which was one of my big fears, that I would regret it if I left. Because we couldn't really see what was on the other side of this.
Right. That's
right.
Exactly it. You can't see.
And so I went home that night and we talked it through, and he could see that something in me had shifted and that I was really pretty single-minded about it at that point. And I knew that it was time to make the change. And so I went back into work the next day, offered my letter of resignation. My boss begged me not to leave. And I said, no, this is really something I need to do. And so about 6 weeks later, I launched out on my own.
Good for you.
And I started this business having zero idea what I was doing, really.
Yeah. Faking it till you make it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And you asked me earlier what the impact of that job was on me. And I will say that for about the first 6 months, I had what I describe as a professional hangover.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about
where I just needed to decompress. I needed to let my body and my brain reset. And I kind of wandered around my house going, okay, so now what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know how to even really get started effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of in recovery mode from that work. And I would not trade that career for anything. And I'm so glad I'm not doing it anymore.
I can say that you're not the first person to have that experience who's had a very heavy type of role in life.
Yeah.
That has said the same thing, where they it's like afterwards they needed to recover, and it was like a body soul type of thing. It was a need to just kind of be and figure some things out, and that's what they called it. It was like recovery.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Our body does hold so much that we don't realize.
It does. It really does. There's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh my goodness, I was in a meeting and they were just talking about this book. That's so weird that book came up twice today.
Yeah. Oh, just today. Yeah. It talks about this idea that processing trauma and stress, and really that, I was processing secondary trauma for many years. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. Yeah. And our bodies do absorb that. And so it really took some time for me to kind of calm down from that, to calm my brain down from it. I still think about some of my cases, of course, but the lovely thing about the shift that I made is I coach parents on a whole wide range of issues, but a lot of the public speaking that I do is around the idea of prevention. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I now get to be on the other side of that, mm-hmm. and stopping some of those crimes before they happen. Mm-hmm. And that feels like a really nice full circle moment for me.
I agree. That feels good to me too. I really like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious because just really quick with that time of recovery, after leaving that work, I'm curious if there was anything that you did for yourself that you felt really helped you kind of bring yourself back to yourself, if you will. Just because I feel like a lot of people have been going through a lot of trauma, and, mm-hmm. If there's anything that worked for you, maybe that might work for them.
Yeah. It's going to sound very cliche, but what I did and what I started to learn to do was to put myself back on the list, and not just on the two, we all have to-do lists, right?
Oh, yes.
And we care for especially women, right? We care mm-hmm. for everyone around us. And I learned that if I wasn't putting myself on that list of things, of people to care for, that my body and my brain were not going to function as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so I learned to put myself back on the list. And in fact, I learned to put myself at the top of the list.
Yes. And that is not cliche. That needs to be said over and over and over again.
It does. It really does. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the weird thing about cliches is they can actually be true.
Yeah.
And this is so, so true. And so I really learned to not just be on the list, but to actually look at what do I need right now. And there was, coupled with sort of this freedom of leaving that job, there was also a lot of sadness and grief. And I felt incomplete for a little while, having left something that was so important to me. And I hadn't yet absorbed the message that I was entitled to do that and to make a change. And so by putting myself at the top of the list, I could do things like take a walk, move my body, make meals that felt nourishing to me, and just slow down a little bit. Which does not, I will be honest, does not always come naturally to me.
Well, and life doesn't make it easy often to slow down.
No, and parenting doesn't make it easy, right?
Yes.
Life, parenting, in the mix of all of that, my beloved grandmother was put on hospice and ended up dying. And while that sounds like a really sad moment, and it was, I also, because I had left this work and made decisions for myself, was able to spend a month with her.
Oh, that's precious. That's absolutely
It was
precious.
so precious. It was so precious. And something I would not have had the freedom to do had I not made some choices that were for me.
Oh, good for you. Because that's not something you can, those are times that you can't get back. So that was wonderful. Now, tell me more about this growth. So you made this change and you decide to start building this coaching practice. And this is not an easy thing to do. It's not like you're like, oh, okay, I'm building my coaching practice, tra-la, and here it is. So tell me about that. How is that for you?
Yeah. So, it's still a work in progress. I think, again, my personality is such that I'm always trying to, do better, do better for my clients, do better for my business. But the way I kind of got started was I did a lot of speaking engagements. I'm having been a litigator for as long as I was, I'm pretty comfortable standing in front of an audience.
Grateful for that.
Yes, very grateful for that. I had to do that enough that, while public speaking is a huge fear of many people, it just isn't for me. So I was able to leverage that and do public speaking in parent groups, in our local hospital group. They've got a parenting group there, and at some PTAs, for schools around the area, to talk about parenting and various aspects of parenting. I then had this was just a piece of good fortune, but because I was making an effort to kind of get out there and meet as many people in this new field of both entrepreneurship and parent education and parent work, I had the really good fortune to meet a woman who had started a business in my area called Savvy Parents Safe Kids. She'd been running it for about 10 years. And was not interested in running the business any longer. And she had sort of handed it off to a gal that had done some work with her. And that gal hadn't really shown any interest in running the business. So I purchased that business. And that gave me a really lucky leg up in the sense that there was kind of a reputation associated with that business. There was a mailing list, and there was some really great content that fed into my expertise, which is how do we keep children safer from child sexual abuse and predatory behavior. And so I was able to add that piece into my coaching practice and started doing professional trainings, and that widened sort of the base of what I was speaking at schools. And that is kind of how I started to build and get clients, right? I did a talk, a client, I, mentioned, of course, dropping those seeds, right? This is what I do. And then the clients kind of started to come in slowly at first, and then eventually at a rate where I'm in a waiting list now.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Word of mouth, right? It makes a big difference. It's like it's hard to get going. And then once you're able to, and people are able to see the results, it starts to make a big difference.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, referrals and just, the parenting community is, or the world of parenting, I guess, and parent education is somewhat small. And so by meeting other people in that space, that kind of spread the word about what I was doing. And fortunately, my clients have been really happy with the work. And so they've spread that word for me, which is really, I'm really grateful for that.
Well, really what you did is great advice for anyone who's starting a coaching practice on how to go around and build a clientele and a presence in a new area. So thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious because this is a study about building that successful, fulfilled life. And that's all based on a few key things. And one of those being what is your personal definition of success? And based on that, what do you think is key to having continued success throughout life?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I don't know that I have one succinct answer.
That's okay.
For what
Give me
success
whatever you want. Yeah.
means to me. Yeah. For me, professionally, it has always been very important that I was making a positive impact on the world around me. And that I was impacting lives for the better. And so, certainly success, when we think about success, we think about the size of the business or the revenue. And of course, those are things that I look at and things that matter, right? I need to contribute and support my family. But for me, the real success comes from waking up every day and feeling like I'm excited about what I get to do. I'm finishing every day feeling like I made a difference for someone, that I'm satisfied with the work that I did, and then that I get to leave that and go be with my family and build those relationships in a really deeply connected, loving way so that they are also thriving.
Yeah.
That's what feels like success to me. So, I could throw out numbers and, all sorts of metrics that we often use to gauge success. But for me, it's really more that satisfaction and the joy that my work brings to me. And it brings me so much joy. And in fact, my husband says, if we had known when we were having these discussions about leaving my old work, if we had known how much work it was going to be, we probably would have said, nope, we're not doing it. But he said, but if we'd known how much joy it was going to bring and how much happier you would be, I would have made you do it years earlier.
That just gave me chills. Yeah, so true. That's winning at life right there. When you have joy in what you do, just what you said, that definition of success. I completely agree. That's how does it get better?
I consider myself so incredibly lucky. I have made some things happen. I've taken steps and taken actions. I also recognize my own privilege in all of this, and that a few fortuitous things kind of came my way. But I really do every day. I think I'm so lucky to get to do this work and to be building and continuing to build this business in bigger and more exciting ways. And every time I see a client, wrap up our work together and say, hey, I've got this. I feel good about my work as parent, professional. So, I feel good with my self-care. That's a win for me. And, the more happier families and happier children we can build, the less there is a need for the work I used to do.
Right. 100%. That's fighting the good fight right there. So, yeah. So, well, I'm wondering what your answer will be to this based on, what we were just talking about, because it sounds like maybe you answered it. But what would you say is your greatest success, or one or two of your greatest successes, and why, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, I definitely think that building this business has been my greatest professional success. Mm-hmm. I had lots of successes working as an attorney. That was a job with really high highs and really low lows. And I was less in control, shall we say, of when those highs and lows came.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that work that I did, but I feel like this business, building this, learning how to run a business, learning how to coach effectively, and partner that with education, learning how to, run the 20 different tech systems that I need to run to make my business work. That feels really where I would say my success is.
Yeah.
And then my other success, which I would say is always a work in progress, just like my business, is my family. And, I described that year after my first kiddo was born being really, really difficult. And we made our way to the other side of that in a really powerful, lovely way. I am so blessed with my husband. My kids are still young, so they're still a work in progress, but I love them more every day, and it's just been really fun to watch them grow up. So
awesome. Yeah. That's great. All right. Well, what about the flip side? What's been a time of your greatest difficulty or greatest challenge, obstacle? How did you get through it, and what did you learn?
Oh, I would say probably the most significant obstacle was what I've largely described already, which was that first year after my first daughter was born, and the incredible shift that created for me, and trying to find my way to the other side of that and navigate my way back to joy.
Yeah.
Which I'm not going to lie, that was a years long process.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, for a lot of people, it's longer.
Yes.
So,
yeah, it is. And that just really was the first time I had really felt like there was something I had zero control over. I know control is elusive anyway, right? But we still like to feel like we have control.
Yeah.
And parenting just has a really amazing way of ripping that right away from you. And so, putting back together my relationship, figuring out who I wanted to be as a parent, and then deciding that I was deserving of my own joy. That is how I kind of got to the other side of that challenge.
That's big right there. Deciding that you're deserving of your own joy. That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
That a lot of people haven't gotten to, and they need to get there right now. You're all worthy and deserving of joy. That's what
we are. Yeah. We are, and we can show up for ourselves and the people that we care about when we prioritize our own joy in such a more beautiful way.
So much more beautiful way. I completely agree. It's a life-changing thing to finally realize, because you're taught, you're taught to look at it differently when at least I was growing up. So I wasn't taught to look at self-care in that way. It was like, you make sure everyone else is okay first. So
that's the message we are given again and again and again. And, we talk about selflessness being this virtue that we want primarily women to embody. And I don't think that serves us.
No.
Self-care. I ride a Peloton bike, and one of the instructors loves to say, self-care is not selfish.
It's not.
And I so subscribe to those words, because we cannot pour from an empty cup.
Right. Yeah. We have to fill ourselves up first.
Yeah.
And it is amazing when you actually do fill yourself up first, what you can give.
Yes.
And how you show up in the world. It's completely different.
Yes.
It's inspiring.
For sure.
When you see that
in all aspects of our world, when we feel like we're getting what we need, it's so much easier to give other people what they need.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And be kind.
Yes. Yes. When I have parents come to me and say, like, I'm yelling at my kids all the time, I don't want to be a yeller. What they want me to do is oftentimes at the beginning of our work is to fix their kids. Right. My kids won't do what I want them to do. And they're often surprised that the place that we start is, all right, how do we get you feeling better so that you don't need to yell all the time.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of parents listening here. So is there any best piece of advice that you would give that could help a wide variety of parents out there?
Well, yes. And I think this actually translates to everyone out there.
Perfect.
And that is remembering that the only person that we have any control over is ourselves. We cannot control our partners. We cannot control our children. And when we try to do that rather than managing ourselves, we're going to get into battles. And that can happen in a professional world and it certainly happens in parenting. But that idea that we have to manage ourselves, control our own behavior before we can ever effectively begin to help someone else manage theirs.
It's very powerful. Is there a golden rule you subscribe to for teenagers? A different beast,
They are. Well, the first one is you got to have a sense of humor.
That's a good one. That's something to remind.
Yes. I mean, we just have to sometimes sit back and giggle a little bit. And then the second one is to remember that they are, and this is true for all children, they are their own complete human beings, deserving of our love and respect because they are human.
Yes.
They are entitled to make mistakes. They are entitled to chart their own path, and they're entitled to figure some things out. And whether it's teenagers or younger kids, when we do for them what they can do for themselves, we are robbing them of the experience of discovering capability, competence, and confidence.
That's so true. There's so much that we learn just by experiencing certain situations and having to deal with them, right? It's very true. Is there any life lesson that you've gone through the hard way that you feel has benefited you the most in life?
Oh.
I mean, like you've learned the hard way, I should say.
Yeah. I feel like even as a parent and a parent coach and a parent educator, I often learn the best way forward in parenting the hard way by making plenty of my own mistakes.
It's so true.
I definitely have learned, I learned the power of a good apology and a good, healthy communication the hard way through that, those really challenging times after the birth of my oldest. I wasn't great at apologies. They were not something that were modeled well for me.
Mm-hmm. You're not alone in
and
that.
It turns out not knowing how to make a true, good, honest, heartfelt apology isn't real great for relationships of any kind.
Yeah. No. This is a really good conversation. Keep going here. This is going to help a lot of people.
I definitely learned that the hard way. My husband, who I'm so lucky for, is much more skilled at the art of the apology than I am. And I've learned so much from him on that. But I think that first year would have been an easier year if we had some better, and I should say we and I had some better communication tools up front. And knew how to make a really good apology. And so that's one of those things when I'm speaking to brand new parents, I share my story and really try to help them avoid some of the mistakes that I made.
Yeah.
The second time around when we had our second, it was a completely different experience because I had learned some of those lessons and it was
tools.
A lot more fun.
Right. Makes a big difference. I'm curious though, what did you learn about a good apology? What makes a good apology? Because I know there's listeners that are likely struggling with apologies, and this is a big thing. A good apology makes a huge difference.
It does. It does. So what we really have to do in a good apology, first of all, is we have to recognize our own culpability in what happened. And that's really, really hard for people to do because we're not accustomed, many of us are not taught that it's okay to make a mistake. And so we kind of equate mistakes with our value as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning to separate those things out and look at mistakes for both us and our kids and our partners as opportunities for learning can make a big difference. And it can make it a lot easier to acknowledge our own role that we played in whatever happened. Mm-hmm. The second piece of it is saying I'm sorry, but doing that in a way that's not like, I'm sorry you feel. Right?
Yes.
Which is really putting the fault on the other person or putting the, you are the one with those feelings. I'm real sorry that you're feeling that way. So instead saying, I'm really sorry for how for what I did or how I behaved or what I said that made you feel that way. So taking it back into ourselves. And then the really important sort of final piece of that is asking, how do we reconcile? How do we move forward? Or explaining what I'm going to do to make sure that mistake doesn't happen again. So it's kind of a 3-part. We've got to recognize our own culpability, make that reconciliation, and then the repair, which is how we're going to move forward in a better way.
Wonderful. That's really good advice all around. Thank you. So I'm curious, is there you mentioned a book earlier. Is there any other book that you would suggest, or even if it was a video or a talk of some sort that had a big impact on your life that you would suggest people might benefit from as well?
Yes. So in the sort of general world, I would say any book by Brené Brown. Yes. I love her. I love her work. I think it's really powerful, and that we would be a healthier world if more people heard her message.
If people had to pick one, Brené Brown, which one would you say? Is that tough? It's kind of tough.
That's a tough one, but I think I would start maybe with The Gifts of Imperfection.
Okay, Gifts of Imperfection. Okay, and I know you had another one that you were following up with. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
Well, Daring Greatly is another book that she has that I think is really beautiful. And because I am in the parenting space, she has a parenting manifesto that she wrote that I think is one of the most beautiful pieces of writing about parenting that I've ever read. It's 1 page. I cannot read it out loud without choking up. It's really, really powerful. So it's not, I think it is in Daring Greatly, but it's, you can get it on her website and print it out, and it's just really, really lovely. The other one is a talk that I frequently send clients to, because it's really easy for us to get in our own heads and say, well, this is hard for me, but it's so much harder for, the other somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. There are lots of things right now we could say somebody else has it harder. Lots of things.
Yes.
Right. But a woman named Ash Beckham did a brilliant TEDx talk a number of years ago about, and it was actually in part the story of her coming out of the closet. And while I don't personally relate to that narrative, her overall message about that we don't need to compare hard. Everybody's hard is just hard. Yeah. And I don't have to say your hard is harder than my hard for my hard to be legitimate. Right. And it's just a really lovely way of kind of saying, hey, we are all in struggle here. She's Ash Beckham is a brilliant, brilliant speaker, and weaves story in such a lovely way that's one of the reasons it was, made such an impact on me and why I refer clients to it so frequently.
I'm going to definitely listen to it myself too. So good suggestions. Thank you.
Yes.
So now if people want to find you, are you taking, no, you have a waiting list. So people want to get on your waiting list.
Yeah. So I'm actually will be opening some spots up again soon. I just have been doing some work for a school district that took up a bunch of my coaching spots.
Yeah.
So the best way people can find me is to go to theheartfulparent.com, and it's HEARTFUL parent.com. And I work with parents in a bunch of different ways. So I obviously do one-on-one coaching. I also have an online membership for parents where parents can get support from me in a slightly different, but I think equally great way.
Great.
And if they go to my website, there's a great download there on the first page called Parenting Outside the Box. And that just talks about how we can more heartfully solve challenges that come up with our kids. And I will say that for those listeners who are not parents, I actually think the framework is pretty useful in business, in partnerships, in every relationship that we might be engaged in.
Right. The advice, it carries, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
That's great. So, and I'll have all the links in the show notes as well for listeners to go and find more information about you. But
Perfect.
This has been wonderful. I really appreciate your time. But before you go, one last question. What are you sure of in life?
Oh, I love this question. The thing that I'm sure of in life is that the way that we spend our minutes and the way that we spend our hours and the way that we spend our days is the way that we spend our lives. And we have to remember that in the minutes, hours, and days so that we are making the best of them.
Very powerful. Thank you so much. This has been great. I love the talk, Christy.
Oh, thank you. This has been such a lovely conversation. Thank you.
It's been fun.
I loved hearing about Christy's story. This Mother's Day, I wanted to share the story of a mother who has been fighting the good fight for everyone else's kids. Thank you. Christy shared that she found her way to becoming a prosecutor because there was a prosecutor in her college life that she greatly admired. She could see that she was living a good and meaningful life, and it resonated within Christy. She decided to follow in those footsteps. Now, how Christy found her way to being a prosecutor is a great way to figuring out what it is that you want in life. Often, when someone is asked, "What do you really want?" they do not know how to answer. Sometimes what you really want, it's been buried under so many other people's wants and needs that it takes a lot of time to dig out what is there. Now, what I believe is important is to pay attention to the people that you admire and the things that you find envious. If you find yourself admiring someone, why? What is it about them that you admire? This will give you insight into your own wants and needs. If something makes you jealous or envious, turn that feeling into one of inspiration. Tell yourself you are inspired rather than jealous. The reason you're feeling this way is because the person is embodying something that you wish for yourself. What is that? What is it that you wish for yourself? Let that inspire you. You can have it too. Once you know what you want, you can start making the plans and taking those baby steps to get you there. We live in an incredibly abundant world. You too can have whatever you see in someone else. I actually do this with myself consistently. It's how I gained the confidence to be here talking with you. I saw a woman give a speech about a topic that I had no interest in, yet she completely captivated me. I thought to myself, what an amazing skill. She's incredible. I want to learn how to speak like that. So I started going to Toastmasters and I learned public speaking skills. Last summer, I watched a woman do a routine in the silk ropes, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's so incredible. I want to learn how to do that. I just had my first lesson last week. I'm just learning, but I really had fun, and I'm looking forward to trying it again. Who have you caught yourself admiring recently? What was it about them? What was it about them that you were wishing for in yourself? Identify that and go after it. Christy, she went on to become a successful prosecutor. She covered everything from burglary to murder before finding herself in the sex crimes unit. She was fighting for people and voices struggling to be heard. She witnessed the underbelly of the world on a daily basis, dealing with victims who should have never known there was such evil in the world, let alone have already experienced it. This is very difficult work. She had to learn how to compartmentalize. She was deeply connected and passionate about the work, but she had to learn how to detach from the emotions of others and how to leave work at work. And this is a vital skill to learn. To learn how to carry only what is yours and to put down the baggage that belongs to others is an incredibly important and freeing life skill. Yes, you want to care. Yes, you want to have compassion and empathy. Yes, you want to offer help when you are capable, but you do not want to carry. I used to carry it all. All of the hurts and traumas that my loved ones were going through, I would carry them with me always, as if they were my own hurts and traumas. For empaths, this is a very easy thing to do. But when you do this, you end up buried under everyone else's hurts and traumas. You are soul heavy. You are burdened. And you often spend so much time worrying about everyone else's troubles that you do not spend enough time dealing with your own. And this is not the way. I learned to think of these burdens as pieces of luggage. I would like to suggest that you take a moment to close your eyes and think of each burden that you've been carrying. Each worry that has been riding along with you in your mind, make each one a different piece of luggage. Then ask yourself, which of these pieces do not belong to me? The ones that do not belong to you, I want you to visualize yourself physically putting those bags on the ground. Picture them on the ground and you leave them there. They do not belong to you. You do not have to carry them. You deserve to travel lighter. And by doing this, you will find yourself with a much stronger capacity to be of genuine help to those who need you. Now, Christy, she loved her work, but things began to shift after she had a child. Her priorities, her interests, they slowly began to change. She learned quickly that corporate America is not set up to help parents successfully navigate their career, and she started thinking about the healthiest ways parents can be supported to make the best decisions. She randomly found this coaching website for a parenting coach certification, and she found herself being drawn to it. Over and over and over again. Over the course of a couple of years, she kept looking at this website and thinking about the possibility. Her one job had been her world for so long, it was hard to think about changing. She had been driven for so long, focused for so long in this one direction. She felt, what right did she have to change? So let's be very clear here. She had every right to change. This is your one life. You get to make the choices of how you live it, and you can make a change at any age or any stage in life. So often you stay because you've been there so long, because you spent so much time, because you've been so focused, you've been so driven, but things change. Life changes, your wants and needs change, and that is okay. That is normal. Sometimes in life, it's perfectly okay to close one chapter and open another. Is there anything you keep going back to over and over again? Is there anything that keeps speaking to your heart? I'm going to ask you to please take the time to listen. Christy ended up taking that training that kept calling to her, and she put in her resignation and she launched out on her own. This was incredibly brave and scary, yet such a worthy move. She did not know how to get started. She did not know how to run a business, but she faked it until she made it, and she learned along the way. And so can you. You can learn anything that has been calling out to you. Christy also offered up excellent advice around what makes a good apology. And I find this to be very important to understand if you want to keep long, healthy relationships. Really knowing how to apologize correctly is vital to all healthy relationships, both personal and business related. Now, a good apology has 3 parts. First, you need to recognize your own culpability. It is okay to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. What is important is that you own your mistakes. Now, second, say you're sorry, but in a way that is empathetic to the person and your actions that played a part. You are not sorry. They are feeling this way. You do not make it the fault of the other person. You are sorry for what you did or how you behaved. Keep the focus on you rather than the other person. And third, how do you reconcile the situation? How do you move forward? How can you explain what you're going to do so that this will never happen again? How do you move forward in a better way together? 3 steps: recognize, reconciliation, and repair. Now you know how to move forward in your relationships when a mistake is made. Now, finally, I want to leave you with one of my favorite moments of our talk. When I asked Christy what worked for her to get over her own tough times and her own trauma, she reminded us all of how important it is to put yourself back on the list. We all have to-do lists. We care for everyone around us, but are you caring for yourself as well? Are you at the top of your own list? If not, add yourself there. It is not selfishness, it is self-care. And without that self-care, you will only be a shadow of yourself showing up for others. You will find yourself becoming more negative, more judgmental, and less tolerant and able to deal with life's ups and downs. When you do take care of yourself, when you ask yourself, what do I need right now? When you prioritize your own needs and your own joy, you fulfill yourself. And when you fulfill yourself, you are able to show up for others and the world overflowing with positivity, acceptance, and fully present and loving with what you have to give. Please put yourself back on the top of your list. And that is my wish for us all, that you take the time to fill yourself up, overflowing, and then you take that overflow and you share it with the world around you. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please subscribe and follow us on all streaming services, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Player FM. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Fresh Blood Podcast. I would love your help in spreading these stories and important messages. Please give us a like and share with a friend. Your help is greatly appreciated. I hope you make today a most fulfilling day.